An 85-year-old Marine veteran walks into his old bar for a quiet cup of coffee, only to be punched in the face by a biker half his age. No one steps in. No one says a word, but the silence does not last long. 30 minutes later, his son arrives, not alone, but with a military strike team. What happens next forces an entire town to confront what respect really means. Hit like and comment where you are watching from. Your support brings more amazing stories. Now let us begin. The jukebox played an old country tune, barely heard over the clinking of glasses and murmurs at Mel's Roadhouse, a roadside bar tucked off Highway 9. At a corner table sat 85-year-old Hank Callahan, dressed in his neatly pressed denim shirt, black veteran's cap, and worn leather boots. Every Wednesday afternoon for the last 5 years, Hank had walked in with a quiet nod, sat in the same seat, ordered black coffee, and watched the world go by, just as he used to when he owned the place decades ago. Most people did not know who Hank was. They just saw an old man with sun-wrinkled skin and a slow walk. What they missed were the twin silver bars tattooed on his soul, the weight of being a retired Marine Corps first sergeant, a man who had led young soldiers through fire and fear, then returned to a civilian world that often looked away. That afternoon, as Hank took his seat, 3 bikers pushed through the door with a burst of wind and loud laughter. They smelled of beer and exhaust, their leather vests heavy with patches no one had earned. One of them, tall, thick-armed with a permanent sneer, scanned the room and smirked when he spotted Hank. "Look at Grandpa Valor." The biker laughed, nudging his friend. "You still think you are a hero, huh?" Hank looked up slowly, met the man's gaze, and said nothing. His silence was firm, steady, unshaken. That only seemed to provoke the man more. "Hey, I am talking to you," the biker growled, now towering over him. "You deaf or just dumb?" Still no reply. Hank just raised his coffee to his lips. The biker slapped the mug out of his hands. It shattered on the floor. The bar went dead quiet. Then came the punch. A hard, unexpected right hook caught Hank across the cheek, sending him sideways off the stool. Gasps filled the room, but no one moved. Not the bartender, not the patrons, not even the staff. On the floor, Hank slowly pushed himself up with one hand and reached into his coat with the other. Not for a weapon, but for a phone. His fingers trembled, not from fear, but age. He dialed one number, just one. Then he said calmly, "Son, it is me. I need you to come." Colonel Jacob Callahan was in the middle of a training debrief when his encrypted phone buzzed. One glance at the caller ID made his voice catch mid-sentence. His father never called during the day, never during duty hours. Without a word, Jacob excused himself from the room, filled with junior officers, and stepped into the hallway. He answered in stride. "Dad." The voice on the other end was calm, composed, too composed. "I need you to come," Hank said slowly. "Now." No details, no drama. But Jacob could hear it. A Marine knows when another Marine is signaling distress, even one as old and proud as his father. 5 minutes later, a mission-ready strike vehicle pulled out of Fort Griffin's south gate. Jacob rode passenger side. His team already briefed, though details were few, just coordinates, and one clear objective: protect the first sergeant. Back at Mel's Roadhouse, Hank sat alone again, his jaw bruised, a cut blooming purple beneath his eye. The bikers had returned to their seats, laughing, emboldened by the room's silence. The bartender wiped the counter nervously, refusing to make eye contact. A waitress whispered near the kitchen door, but never came out. "Guess he is calling in the nursing home," one of the bikers chuckled. "Maybe they will wheel him out before he breaks a hip." But Hank never looked their way. He simply folded his hands and waited. Outside, dark clouds rolled across the highway. The sound came first, a low rolling hum growing louder by the second. It was not thunder. It was horsepower. A convoy of matte black SUVs and tactical trucks rounded the corner and screeched to a halt in front of the bar. Doors swung open in unison. From the lead vehicle stepped Colonel Jacob Callahan. Sharp jaw, steely eyes, camouflage fatigues clean as a blade. His insignia gleaming beneath the overcast sky. He moved like a man used to commanding respect. And behind him, 6 men followed, all in civilian gear, but unmistakably military in posture and bearing. The entire bar turned to the door as it swung open. Jacob entered without a word, scanned the room, and locked eyes with his father. Hank nodded once. No need to explain. Jacob turned slowly toward the bar. His gaze fell on the bikers. Which one? He asked. His father pointed. Just once. The biker, stocky, tattooed, arms crossed like steel cables, chuckled as Jacob approached. You bring your fan club, Colonel, he sneered. What is the old man going to do now? Hide behind his kid. Jacob stopped just short of him. Stand up. The room went dead quiet again. No jukebox, no laughter, just tension, hanging like thick smoke. The biker stayed seated, smirking. You got a badge or something? Jacob took a slow breath, then reached into his vest, not for a weapon, but for a small black tablet. He tapped the screen once. A silent video began to play. Every eye in the bar could see the footage. Security cam front angle. Hank sipping coffee. The biker walking over. Words. The mug slapped to the floor. Then the punch. Clear and deliberate. The camera froze just as Hank hit the ground. No excuses now. No gray area. Just proof. Still want to talk tough? Jacob asked coldly. You assaulted a decorated war hero unprovoked in front of witnesses. That is not just disrespect. That is a felony. The biker stood slower now. The arrogance in his face melted into something smaller, less sure. I did not know he was a Marine. Jacob cut in. You did not care. By now, Jacob's team had quietly surrounded the area. One by the door, one near the bartender, the rest forming a subtle perimeter. No guns drawn, but their presence radiated control. The bar manager finally spoke up from behind the counter. Look, Colonel, let us not escalate. No, Jacob snapped. You escalated when you asked my father to leave instead of removing the man who hit him. The staff went pale. Hank, still seated, watched everything unfold with an unreadable expression. He had not asked for this, not for public spectacle or retaliation. He had simply done what any Marine does when outnumbered and outmatched. He called in backup. Outside, 2 sheriff cruisers pulled up, called in earlier by Jacob's second-in-command. The deputies entered, saw the video footage, and without a word placed the biker in cuffs. No resistance now, just a defeated man dragged out under the weight of his own ignorance. But Jacob was not finished. He turned back to the patrons. All of you saw it. None of you stepped in. Not even a word. My father gave his life to protect this country. And today, he sat on that floor alone. Shame spread across faces. He did not need saving. He needed witnesses with a spine. The silence in Mel's Roadhouse hung heavier than any storm. Jacob's words had cut deeper than fists ever could. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the pool table in the back sat abandoned, its game half played, the cue ball resting. In isolation like a symbol of the moral break that had just unfolded. Colonel Jacob Callahan turned away from the patrons, his jaw clenched tight with restraint. He walked back to his father, placed a steady hand on Hank's shoulder, and knelt beside him. You good, old man? Hank nodded, his eyes steady. Took harder hits back in Vietnam. But it was not the punch that stung. It was the silence after. Jacob swallowed hard. He stood, then turned back to the bar manager. We are not here to cause a scene, he said, his voice now calm but firm. But this place just became a lesson in what happens when decency dies quietly. The bar manager lowered his gaze. We did not know what to do. Standing up for what is right is not complicated, Jacob replied. You just do it. Outside, more deputies had arrived, taking statements from patrons. The video was already being sent to the district attorney. The biker, now handcuffed and humiliated, sat in the back of a squad car, his bravado stripped clean. Inside, Hank stood slowly. His legs ached and his ribs reminded him of his age, but his posture remained dignified. He turned to the crowd. I came here every week for coffee, not because I wanted to drink, but because this place used to feel like home. His voice was gravel, but carried the full weight of decades of service. I wore the uniform for 30 years, watched brothers die, watched this country change. But never once did I believe it would forget how to respect those who kept it free. He looked around, his eyes locking briefly with each face. This is not who we are. Not as a town. Not as Americans. By the time Hank finished, heads were bowed. Some eyes were glassy. A man near the jukebox murmured, I am sorry, sir. Another added, we failed you. Jacob stepped in. Do not apologize to us. Do better next time. That is how you honor men like him. From that moment on, everything shifted. 2 weeks later, Mel's Roadhouse looked different. Gone were the dusty military signs used only as decor. In their place, real honor had taken root. At the bar's center now stood a glass case, a folded American flag inside, flanked by Hank Callahan's photograph in uniform, and a brass plaque that read, "In honor of those who stood when others would not. Sergeant First Class Hank Callahan, United States Marine Corps, retired, defender of freedom, reminder of dignity." It had been donated by local veterans who rallied around the incident like a call to arms. The story of the assault, the silence, and the justice that followed had spread across town like wildfire. But more importantly, it sparked something deeper. Veterans began organizing meetups at the bar, turning it into a space for guidance and brotherhood. Young patrons paid attention for the first time, truly listened to the stories of those who had served before them. Even the local high school invited Hank to speak at their assembly, where he received a standing ovation from 600 students. Hank had not asked for recognition, but now that it came, he used it not to criticize, but to educate. One evening, as the sun set in gold over the hills, Hank and Jacob sat quietly outside the bar, drinking lemonades and watching a group of teenagers raise flags along Main Street for Memorial Day. Jacob leaned back in his chair. "You realize you started a movement, right?" Hank shook his head. "Number that biker did. I just reminded people who they were before they lost sight." Jacob smiled. "Still, not many men your age would have responded like you did." Hank looked out across the town, his voice quiet. "My fight ended decades ago, but it is my duty to make sure people know why I stood up." That night, as they stood to leave, something unusual happened. Everyone in the bar rose to their feet. Not one remained seated. The chatter stopped. The music paused, and in perfect silence, each patron placed a hand over their heart. It was not planned. It was not asked for, but it was earned. Hank paused at the door, a little stunned and a little misty-eyed. For a man who had spent a lifetime defending honor, it had finally come home. In the most American way possible, not with banners, but with grace.